Well, hello again, everyone. Greetings from downtown Brandonia, also known as Washington, D.C. And I have this overpriced, underwhelming hotel to spend the weekend in. I brought a friend who's attending a conference where she saw Dr. Anthony Fauci last night. Um, I'm glad I didn't see him, let's put it that way. Uh, I won't go there. But fortunately, it's just her doing that. I'm here in this, as I say, overpriced, underwhelming hotel, which is going to get a two-star review because they don't have parking. And I'll tell you what, if they don't have bacon tomorrow, they're not even going to get the two-star. So what can I say? I need parking when I show up at the 250-mile drive. I don't want it to park in some garage I don't know, and then go look for my stuff later. Sorry, you need to have parking. You're charging 300 something a night. I want a place to park my vehicle. You don't give me one, you get two stars, and be thankful you got that many. I digress. Okay, I've got a little time on my hands, so uh, it occurred to me I don't have my documents here, so I really can't work on my KGB report or the Ephesians 2:8 and 9 essay, which I'm going to do too with the slideshow. But there was a conversation I had a couple nights ago with CJ Cox. Now, I shared a video with CJ the Cynicoke, which made quite clear that the word eclectos, the adjective, the Koine adjective eclectos, does not mean what he thinks it means, or what any other Calvin freak thinks it means. This adjective has been translated in our English Bibles as elect. Well, big surprise. Who do you think put together the documents? That gave us our English Bibles. That gave us the Bibles in the vernacular. They were Calvin freaks. The Textus Receptus was put together by a Calvin freak named Stephanus. It was printed by his son, who was also in the inner circle. The first Greek lexicon we have, the first Koine lexicon, which is a dictionary of Greek words from the New Testament era, made by a Calvin freak named Stephanus and his son Henri, printed in 1572. This is what the King James Version of the Bible, these people refer to these documents, the Textus Receptus, um, also uh, the Greek and Latin New Testament compiled by Theodore Beza, who was the direct successor of John Calvin in Geneva. So the King James Bible translators, they used four different editions of Theodore Beza, his Greek New Testament, Greek and Latin New Testament, all the way up to 1598 edition, just a few years before the King James version was getting started. All that to say that, we would love to think that if there's one thing we can read and trust, it's our Bibles, but we don't have the original documents. We have translations, and we have translations that were made by men who had very different, or I should say, very definite ideas about how churches should be run and how salvation is obtained. And they had the source documents, the original copies of the Greek New Testament. They had Jerome's Latin translation of the Bible, which is over 1,000 years old. They revised it. They put they had to make some translation decisions, and some of those decisions are pretty dubious. And I can see now, before I go into my Ephesians 2:8 and 9 slideshow, I could tell that there's going to be a great deal of difficulty because we've been trained to, when we see the English word faith, to think it's always talking about mental processes. and not loyalty, not fidelity. Although the Greek word pistis, G4102, can be translated faithful, faithfulness. It is a translator's choice. There are a lot of translators' choices in our English Bibles. And one of them I was arguing with C.J. Cox, the synagogue. One of those translation choices was elect. And everyone seems to think that means specifically chosen, preferred over others. That's not what it meant in the Septuagint, which is the Greek Old Testament. The scriptures that Jesus and Paul used became known as the Septuagint, the 70. In the 70, and over 500 times, the Greek word eklektos, the adjective eklektos, translated elect in our English Bibles. Over 500 times that word eklektos is used in the Old Testament. And in each case, it means excellent, choice, the very best. When Jesus said, many are called, but few are chosen, what he said was, many are offered, but few are up to it. Few have the mettle. Few have what it takes. Many are called, but few are chosen. Chosen, Calvinists believe that means chosen randomly, arbitrarily, from before the time they were born. No, that word eklektos meant many are called, but few are excellent. So I could say, trying to convince people who have been trained to think about certain words, like faith. We've all been trained to think that faith is just simply mental activities. You look in Romans 1:17. What does it say? Paul is quoting from the Old Testament book Habakkuk. The righteous shall live by faith. When we hear that, we're thinking, oh yes, the righteous are simply thinking those good thoughts about Jesus. They're believing that he actually was raised. They're believing he's seated at the right hand of the Father. That's not what Habakkuk was talking about. That's not what Paul was talking about. And it's not what the author of the letter to the Hebrews was talking about when he quotes from Habakkuk 2 in 10:38. He says, he gives you the full quote from the Septuagint. My righteous one, I take no pleasure if my righteous one draws back, but the righteous shall live by faith. I'm quoting this from memory. But they're talking about fidelity. So we are used to thinking of certain words in certain ways because we have Bibles that were produced by men with certain agendas. And that's a hard, bitter pill to swallow. We want to think if there's one thing we can trust in this world, it's our Bibles. Well, you know what? You can trust them. You can trust the original documents, but we don't have the original documents. We have translations. And again, they were translated by men with definite agendas. Anti-Roman Catholic agendas, specifically. Calvinist agendas. So I can see this is going to be, to convince most anyone of anything is going to be quite difficult. Now, that video I gave to C.J. Cox, this fellow who wrote an entire book on why there are no elect people in the Bible, elect as he knows the term. This guy makes an overwhelming case. I shared this with C.J. Cox, who's not an idiot. He's an ideologue, but he's not an idiot. But he couldn't take any of the criticism seriously. We love to believe what we love to believe. And that's why, the sin-sick world, for good reason, fears and hates Christianity because they think Christians are people who are incapable of thinking critically. that we don't have any respect for reason or evidence. In fact, they think, and with some justification, that Christianity is a species of mental illness and a dangerous species of mental illness. They said we are people of faith, we are people of superstition. You know what? That goes to the incorrect definition of the word faith again. We are not people of superstition, we are people of loyalty. Jesus didn't say, take it on faith, I'm the Son of God. He proved who he was. And he didn't say, you're going to have to trust me. I'm the Son of God. He showed you that he was the Son of God. He said you would know the truth. You wouldn't have to trust him for it. All this to say, I think I have my work cut out for you. Trying to teach you anything about Ephesians 2:8 with that word faith. You have been saved by grace through faith. Most of you will not believe, even though I could prove it using the language. You're not going to believe that the faith in Ephesians 2:8 is talking about fidelity, not mental activity. You just won't. Just like C.J. Cox, I could show him, again, more evidence that elect in the Bible is talking about excellence, not talking about people who've been arbitrarily chosen over others for no good reason, other than God is sovereign. That's not what the word means, CJ. But again, we want to believe what we want to believe. And that's why, again, the people outside of Christianity look at us and say, wow, these people are just, they're out of their minds, and I don't want any part of this. I'm not going to commit mental or intellectual suicide, just to have the warm fuzzies of going to church with these people. They have good reason to suspect that we are contemptuous of logic and of evidence. We need to change their mind about that. And we will when we stop being contemptuous of logic and of evidence. Okay, I think this video might be running long again, so I'm going to stop here before I start preaching. And I guess I'll be back to you when I'm back in New York City, which is another problematic place, but at least it's home. Have a good weekend, everyone.